Oh, hello. Because you're my friend, I'd like to let you in on a little bit of a secret. I have two polar bears down in my basement. They're 9 feet tall, weigh 1,000 pounds each, and their names are Howard and Betty Longquist. I took them in because their glacier that they lived on melted, and my basement's always so chilly. They're really lovely house guests, Howard and Betty. My only complaint is really that they always forget to put the DVDs back in their cases. And at night, if there's nothing good in the fridge, they come up to my room and try to eat me. Now, you might wonder, why would you put up with house guests that want to eat you? It doesn't make any sense. Well, if everything we said and did made sense, well, it would be a very boring world indeed. And now, here's a poem that makes so little sense, it makes complete sense. The Walrus and the Carpenter by Lewis Carroll. The sun was shining on the sea, shining with all his might. He did his very best to make the billows smooth and bright, and this was odd because it was the middle of the night. The moon was shining sulkily because she thought the sun had got no business to be there after the day was done. "Well, it's very rude of him," she said, "to come and spoil the fun." The sea was wet as wet could be, the sands were dry as dry. You could not see a cloud because no cloud was in the sky. No birds were flying overhead, there were no birds to fly. The Walrus and the Carpenter were walking close at hand. They wept like anything to see such quantities of sand. "Oh, if this was only cleared away," they said, "well, it would be grand. If 7 maids with 7 mops swept it for a year, do you suppose," the Walrus said, "that they could get it clear?" "Oh, I doubt it," said the Carpenter, and shed a bitter tear. "Oh, oysters, come and walk with us," the Walrus did beseech. "A pleasant walk, a pleasant talk along the briny beach. We cannot do with more than 4 to give a hand to each." The eldest oyster looked at him, but never a word he said. The eldest oyster winked his eye and shook his heavy head, meaning to say he did not choose to leave the oyster bed. But 4 young oysters hurried up, all eager for the treat. Their coats were brushed, their faces washed, their shoes were clean and neat. And this was odd because, they hadn't any feet. 4 other oysters followed them, and yet another 4, and thick and fast they came at last, and more and more and more, all hopping through the frothy waves and scrambling to the shore. The Walrus and the Carpenter walked on a mile or so, and then they rested on a rock conveniently low, and all the little oysters stood and waited in a row. "The time has come," the Walrus said, "to talk of many things, of shoes and ships and sealing wax, of cabbages and kings, and why the sea is boiling hot, and whether pigs have wings." "But wait a bit," the oysters cried, "before we have our chat, for some of us are out of breath and all of us are fat." "No hurry," said the Carpenter, and they thanked him much for that. "A loaf of bread," the Walrus said, "is what we chiefly need. Pepper and vinegar besides are very good indeed. Now, if you're ready, oysters dear, we can begin to feed." "But not on us," the oysters cried, turning a little blue. "After such kindness, that would be a dismal thing to do." "The night is fine," the Walrus said. "Do you admire the view? It was so kind of you to come, and you are very nice." Well, the Carpenter said nothing but, "Cut us another slice. I wish you were not quite so deaf. I've had to ask you twice." "Well, it seems a shame," the Walrus said, "to play them such a trick, after we brought them out so far and made them to trot so quick." Well, the Carpenter said nothing but, "The butter is spread too thick." "I weep for you," the Walrus said, "I deeply sympathize." With sobs and tears he sorted out those of the largest size, holding his pocket handkerchief before his streaming eyes. "Oh, oysters," said the Carpenter, "you've had a pleasant run. Shall we be trotting home again?" But answer came there none, and this was scarcely odd because they'd eaten every one. Oh, Betty and Howard Lundquist are getting romantic in the basement again. It's going to be a long night. Do you know what I'm trying to do? I'm trying to bend the spoon using only the power of my mind. Bend. 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 Okay. Time for plan B. You know, you should always have plan B in life, just in case plan A doesn't work out. And if possible, it should involve ice cream. Now, here's a story about a different kind of a brain. It's about a young girl who uses her wits to try to figure out a strange mystery that no one else can solve. It's the winner of my 2011 Be a Famous Writer contest in the 9 to 13 age category. And it's by Emma Stowe from Alabama. The story is called Thinking Cap. Miss Applewood's 4th grade class was so quiet they could hear their class gerbil Ginger nibbling on her food in the back of the room. They were quiet because Miss Applewood had just told them she had an announcement to make. Announcements were never good. The first time it was to say that Ricky was moving to Toronto. The second time she told the class she was disappointed because no one got an A on the math test. Except Ginger, she joked. She must have used her thinking cap. Miss Applewood loved it when the 4th graders used their thinking caps. Then there was the time that the class couldn't go out to the playground because the equipment was being repainted. Miss Applewood had made an announcement about that too. Miss Applewood took a deep breath and repeated, "I have an announcement to make." Then she continued, "Ginger has gone missing." A few gasps could be heard. Of the people who gasped, Lily's was probably the loudest. Lily loved Ginger as if she was all her own. Of course, she shared her very nicely with the rest of the class, but deep down inside, she liked to pretend that Ginger just belonged to her. Her sister was allergic to fur, so Lily couldn't have a pet of her own. Unless you count the goldfish, but Lily never did. Lily squirmed in her seat. Ginger was missing. Lily imagined the small furry creature gerbil with her adorable butterscotch-colored spots, the one who she fed the carrots out of her lunch to, and she almost started to cry. But before she could, the recess bell rang, and Miss Applewood dismissed the class. Lily ran out the door like all the other students. However, Lily did not run to the playground. She ran past the door and stopped. She had a mystery to solve. Lily reached into her pocket and pulled out the small purple spiral notebook she had brought. She neatly wrote, "The Case of the Missing Gerbil," on the first line. She tried to think about clues. To begin with, the cage was still in the classroom. Maybe she could find out how Ginger escaped. It would be tricky, though, if Miss Applewood was in there. However, Lily thought it would be worth it if she found Ginger, and resolved to check. She walked back in on tiptoe, back into room 34, and was relieved to see that Miss Applewood wasn't there. She must have been on playground duty. Lily crept in and examined the cage in the back of the room. Starting at the top, she gently wiggled each of the metal bars, and finally, at the bottom left corner, there was a loose one. It could be bent enough for her to fit her entire hand in the cage. Ginger could easily fit through it. She wrote that down on her list of clues. Lily was confused, bewildered even. Where would Ginger go after she escaped? Lily got on all fours and tried to think like a gerbil. It was frustrating, though. She ran her fingers through her straight brunette hair, which was what she always did when she was thinking hard. Lily began thinking about her hair, and how much she enjoyed it if it were just a tiny bit wavy. Then she suddenly stopped. Hair! That was the answer to the mystery. As she was thinking, she had noticed there was cream and butterscotch fur sprinkled along the floor next to the cage. Well, Ginger must have gone in the direction of the trail of fur was headed. Lily did not even stop to record that clue in her notebook. She followed the fur to the other side of the classroom. After a while, though, the fur train stopped. She wondered aloud. She once again thought in gerbil mode. She thought to herself, if I were Ginger, where would I be? Her thoughts drew her eyes to a slight crack in the wall opposite the cage. It was just the right size for a small cream and butterscotch gerbil. Then a little nibbled-on piece of lettuce confirmed her suspicion. The green leaf had tiny teeth marks on it, and it was just barely inside the hole in the wall. Ginger must be inside the wall. There was just one problem. How would she get Ginger out of there? She put her thinking cap on, just like Miss Applewood loved. Finally, she came up with a plan. She first obtained her lunchbox from her cubby in the back of the room. Then she unzipped it, and she got out a plastic baggie filled with small carrots. She removed one carrot from the bag and placed it next to the lettuce. She knew how much Ginger loved carrots. Lily held her breath and crossed her fingers for good luck, hoping Ginger would come. She counted to 10 in her mind. She wiggled her 3 fingers on each hand, which were not occupied being crossed. She chewed on her lip. She looked at the clock. She counted to 10 again, and finally she heard a familiar skit, the sound of Ginger's delicate feet hitting the floor as she ran. Lily had solved the case of the missing gerbil. She was perfectly delighted to have found Ginger and couldn't wait to show her discovery to the rest of the class. Luckily, she didn't have long to wait. As Ginger put the last bite in the small orange carrot into her mouth, the bell rang, pronouncing the end of the recess. The 4th graders flooded in and saw Lily holding Ginger. "Well, it's Ginger!" someone called out. "Well, where did you find her?" a girl asked. "Well, what happened?" a boy chimed in. Lily, grinning from ear to ear, told them the story, and Miss Applewood, also smiling, said, "Way to use your thinking cap, Lily." The end.